Three veteran police officers stand before an internal affairs board, their badges and weapons surrendered. The youngest trembles as body camera footage plays, showing a 17-year-old black teenager making a single phone call. That call would expose decades of corruption and end careers that seemed untouchable forever. Before we dive into this incredible story of justice and courage, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more shocking true stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. This tale of one phone call that changed everything will leave you speechless. Let's begin this unbelievable journey together. The summer heat still clung to the streets of Millfield Heights at 9:30 on that Tuesday evening in July. This wasn't just any neighborhood. This was where judges lived next to surgeons, where corporate executives barbecued with university professors, where perfectly manicured lawns stretched like green carpets between million-dollar homes. And walking down Elmwood Avenue, backpack slung over his shoulder, was 17-year-old Jamal Thompson. Jamal had just finished his shift at Cornerstone Books, the independent bookstore where he worked 3 evenings a week. The money wasn't much, but it helped him save for college and surrounded him with the literature he loved. Tonight, he carried copies of To Kill a Mockingbird and the autobiography of Malcolm X that his manager had let him borrow. Ironic choices, considering what was about to unfold. Despite living in Millfield Heights his entire life, Jamal never felt completely at ease walking these streets after dark. He'd grown up here, attended Millfield Academy since kindergarten, made the honor roll every semester, and captained the debate team to 3 consecutive state championships. Yet something in the way certain neighbors looked at him, the way conversations sometimes stopped when he approached, reminded him that his presence here was still questioned by some. 3 blocks away, officers Bradley Martinez, Sean O'Connor, and rookie Tyler Webb cruised in their patrol car, finishing what had been a quiet shift. Martinez, a 20-year veteran with graying temples and a thick mustache, drummed his fingers on the steering wheel. His partner O'Connor, equally experienced but leaner and more calculating, scrolled through his phone with bored indifference. In the backseat, Webb tried to project confidence despite being only 3 months out of the academy. "Another peaceful night in paradise," Martinez muttered, his voice carrying the cynicism of 2 decades in uniform. "These rich folks don't know how good they have it." O'Connor glanced up from his phone. "Speak for yourself. I got bills to pay and quotas to meet. We need some action before the month ends." That's when they saw him. Jamal Thompson, walking alone down Elmwood Avenue, his dark skin contrasting sharply with the pristine suburban backdrop. To these officers, he didn't fit their mental image of who belonged in this neighborhood after dark. Martinez slowed the patrol car. Well, look what we have here." "Kid's probably up to no good," O'Connor added, already reaching for his radio. "Bet he doesn't even live around here." Webb shifted uncomfortably in the back seat. Something about this felt wrong, but he was the rookie. Who was he to question veteran officers? He watched as Martinez pulled the car to the curb, the headlights suddenly illuminating Jamal like a spotlight on a stage. The radio crackled to life as O'Connor called it in. "Unit 27 to dispatch. We have a suspicious individual on Elmwood Avenue. Male, approximately 6 feet, wearing dark clothing. Requesting backup for investigation." Jamal noticed the patrol car immediately. His steps didn't falter, but his heart rate quickened. He knew this dance, had heard about it from friends, had seen it on the news countless times. "Stay calm," he told himself. "Be respectful. Don't give them any reason." The car doors slammed shut behind him, and heavy footsteps approached. Jamal continued walking, hoping they would pass by, hoping this was just paranoia. But deep down, he knew his peaceful evening was about to become something much more dangerous. "Excuse me, son," Martinez called out, his voice carrying the authoritative tone that had intimidated countless citizens over the years. "We need to have a word with you." Jamal stopped and slowly turned around, his hands visible, his posture non-threatening. Years of conversations with his father about police encounters had prepared him for this moment, though he'd hoped it would never come. "Good evening, officers," he said, his voice steady and respectful. "Is there something I can help you with?" Martinez and O'Connor exchanged a glance. The kid was polite, articulate. Not what they'd expected. But they'd come this far, called for backup, made the stop. There was no backing down now. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" O'Connor asked, stepping closer. "I live here," Jamal replied simply. "I'm walking home from work." "Work?" Martinez's eyebrows rose skeptically. "What kind of work does a kid like you do around here?" The question stung, but Jamal maintained his composure. "I work at Cornerstone Books on Main Street. I just finished my shift." Webb watched the interaction from a few steps back, noting the teenager's calm demeanor and respectful responses. Something felt off about this whole situation, but Martinez and O'Connor seemed convinced they were onto something. "ID," Martinez demanded, extending his hand. Jamal slowly reached into his back pocket and produced his wallet, extracting his driver's license and student ID. Martinez examined them under his flashlight, squinting at the address. "This says you live on Oakwood Drive," he said suspiciously. "Yes, sir. That's about 6 blocks from here. I'm walking home." O'Connor moved to Jamal's other side, creating a triangular formation that made the teenager feel surrounded. "Funny thing about this neighborhood," he said. "We've had reports of break-ins lately. Young black males about your age and build." Jamal's stomach dropped. He could see where this was heading, and there seemed to be no way to stop it. The truth didn't matter. His perfect attendance at school didn't matter. His college acceptance letters didn't matter. In this moment, he was just another black teenager who didn't belong. "Officers, I understand you're doing your job," Jamal said carefully. "But I really do live here. You can call my parents if you need verification." "Oh, we'll be calling someone," Martinez said with a smirk. "But first, we need to make sure you're not carrying anything you shouldn't be." The situation was escalating exactly as Jamal had feared. In houses along the street, lights flickered on. Curtains moved slightly as neighbors peered out to see what was happening. Some would later claim they wanted to help, but in the moment, they remained safely behind their windows, watching a young black man's life potentially unravel on their perfectly paved streets. As backup sirens wailed in the distance, Jamal realized that his peaceful walk home had become the opening scene of a nightmare that would test everything he'd been taught about justice, truth, and the American dream. The backup units arrived with unnecessary fanfare, their red and blue lights painting the suburban street in chaotic colors. 2 additional patrol cars meant 4 more officers, turning what should have been a simple conversation into a major incident. Neighbors emerged from their homes now, some recording with their phones, others whispering among themselves about the commotion disturbing their quiet evening. Martinez seemed energized by the audience and additional backup. He gestured grandly toward Jamal as if presenting evidence to a jury. This individual was acting suspiciously, walking through the neighborhood after dark. Claims he lives here, but something doesn't add up. Officer Rebecca Santos, one of the backup officers, looked confused. What exactly was he doing that was suspicious? "Walking while black," Webb muttered under his breath, immediately regretting the comment when O'Connor shot him a warning glare. "I heard that, rookie," O'Connor snapped. "Maybe you should keep your opinions to yourself and learn from experienced officers." Jamal stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back in a non-threatening posture. He'd rehearsed this scenario in his mind countless times, coached by his father on how to survive police encounters. Stay calm, be respectful, don't argue, survive first, seek justice later. Martinez began circling Jamal like a predator studying its prey. "You know what I smell?" he announced loudly enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "Marijuana. This kid reeks of it." "That's not possible," Jamal replied calmly. "I don't use drugs. I've never used drugs." "Are you calling me a liar?" Martinez's voice rose aggressively. "Are you saying I don't know what marijuana smells like after 20 years on the force?" O'Connor joined the performance, nodding sagely. "I smell it too. Strong odor of cannabis. We're going to need to search you, son." Jamal's heart raced, but he kept his voice level. "Officers, I don't consent to a search. I know my rights. You need probable cause or a warrant." The crowd of neighbors had grown larger. Mrs. Chen, an elderly Asian woman who lived 3 houses down, held her phone steady as she recorded the encounter. She'd seen enough news stories to know this could go terribly wrong, terribly fast. Probable cause? Martinez laughed harshly. The smell of drugs is probable cause. The fact that you match the description of a suspect in recent burglaries is probable cause. Your attitude is probable cause. What attitude? Jamal asked, genuinely confused. I've been respectful and cooperative. That's the attitude, O'Connor interjected. Acting like you're smarter than us, using big words to try to confuse the situation. We know your type. Webb watched the interaction with growing unease. Nothing about this felt right. The teenager hadn't done anything wrong that he could see, yet his training officers were treating him like a confirmed criminal. The rookie officer found himself questioning everything he'd learned at the academy about community policing and constitutional rights. Martinez stepped closer to Jamal, invading his personal space in a clear intimidation tactic. Empty your pockets, now. Am I under arrest? Jamal asked. You will be if you don't cooperate, O'Connor threatened. Reluctantly, Jamal began emptying his pockets. Wallet, keys, phone, a receipt from the bookstore, some loose change. Martinez examined each item as if it were evidence in a major crime. What's this? Martinez held up the receipt suspiciously. It's my time card receipt from work. It shows when I clocked out tonight. O'Connor snatched the paper and studied it. Cornerstone Books, 8:45 p.m. Anyone can fake one of these. You can call the store, Jamal suggested. My manager. Sarah can verify that I work there. We'll be making plenty of phone calls, Martinez said ominously. Now the backpack. Let's see what you're really carrying. Jamal slipped off his backpack and set it on the ground. Martinez grabbed it roughly and began pulling out its contents. Textbooks for advanced placement classes scattered across the sidewalk, college brochures, his work uniform, the borrowed books from the store. Look at this, Martinez said, holding up the autobiography of Malcolm X. Reading about radical activists. Planning some trouble, are we? It's for my African American history class, Jamal explained. I'm doing a summer reading assignment. Sure you are, O'Connor smirked. What kind of history class assigns books about cop killers? Malcolm X wasn't a cop killer, Jamal said, his academic instincts overriding his caution. He was a civil rights leader who advocated for black empowerment and self-determination. There it is again, Martinez announced to the crowd. Acting. Like he's smarter than everyone else. Probably thinks he's better than the hard-working officers trying to keep this neighborhood safe. Mrs. Chen lowered her phone and called out, Officers, this young man lives here. I've seen him walking to and from school for years. His family is very respectable. Martinez whirled around to face her. Ma'am, please step back and let us do our job. We're dealing with a potential drug dealer here. Drug dealer? Jamal's composure finally cracked slightly. I'm 17 years old. I'm an honor student. I've never been arrested for anything in my life. Yet, O'Connor added menacingly. The situation had spiraled far beyond anything resembling reasonable police work. Webb could see it clearly now. His training officers weren't investigating a crime. They were creating one. But what could he do? Speak up and ruin his career before it started? Or stay silent and become complicit in whatever was about to happen? Martinez knelt beside the scattered contents of Jamal's backpack, his hands moving with practiced deception. As he pretended to examine a textbook more closely, he palmed a small plastic baggie from his own pocket. It was an old trick, one he'd used dozens of times over the years to justify arrests when no real crime existed. Well, 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 Martinez said, standing up with theatrical surprise. Look what we have here. He held up a small baggie containing what appeared to be marijuana. The crowd gasped. Phones came out to record, and Jamal's world began to collapse. That's not mine, Jamal said immediately. I've never seen that before in my life. They all say that, O'Connor laughed. Every drug dealer we arrest claims the drugs aren't theirs. Must be magic drugs that plant themselves. Webb's stomach churned. He'd seen Martinez pocket something during the search. but he dismissed it as his imagination. Now, staring at the planted evidence, he realized he was witnessing a crime being committed by the very officers sworn to prevent them. "You're under arrest for possession of controlled substances," Martinez announced, pulling out his handcuffs with obvious satisfaction. "You have the right to remain silent, though you probably should have tried that earlier." As the metal cuffs clicked around Jamal's wrists, the teenager's mind raced. This couldn't be happening. Not here, not to him, not like this. But as he was led toward the patrol car while neighbors watched and whispered, he realized that all his father's warnings, all his preparation for this moment hadn't been paranoia after all. They had been prophecy. The handcuffs bit into Jamal's wrists as Martinez tightened them with unnecessary force. The cold metal against his skin made everything suddenly real in a way that his mind still struggled to process. This was actually happening. In his own neighborhood, surrounded by people who'd watched him grow up, he was being arrested for a crime he didn't commit. "Let's go, drug dealer," O'Connor said with mock cheerfulness, grabbing Jamal's arm and steering him toward the patrol. "Courtesy time for your first ride in a police cruiser. Hope you enjoy it because where you're going, transportation won't be nearly as comfortable." The crowd of neighbors had grown to nearly 20 people. Some recorded with their phones, others whispered among themselves. Their reactions revealed the deep divisions that existed even in this supposedly progressive community. Mrs. Chen continued, filming, tears streaming down her face as she watched injustice unfold. Mr. Peterson from across the street shook his head and muttered something about finally catching one of them. The Johnsons, a black family who'd moved to the neighborhood just 2 years ago, watched with a mixture of fear and recognition, knowing it could just as easily be their son. "This is wrong," called out Sarah Martinez, no relation to the officer, who taught at the local high school. "I know this boy. He's one of our best students. He would never do drugs." Officer Martinez paused in loading Jamal into the car. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but drugs don't discriminate. Good students, bad students, they all make poor choices sometimes. We found the evidence right in his backpack." "Evidence you planted," Mrs. Chen said boldly, her phone still recording. "I saw you put something in your pocket during the search, and then miraculously find it later." The accusation hung in the air like a thunderclap. Martinez's face flushed red with anger. "That's a serious allegation, lady. Are you accusing a police officer of planting evidence?" "I'm stating what I observed," Mrs. Chen replied firmly, "and I have it recorded." O'Connor stepped forward menacingly. "Recording police officers in the line of duty can be considered interference with an investigation. Maybe we should have a conversation about your role in all this." Webb watched the exchange with growing horror. Not only had his training officers planted drugs on an innocent teenager, but now they were threatening witnesses who'd seen them do it. Every principle he'd learned at the academy, every oath he'd taken to serve and protect, was being violated right in front of him. Jamal was placed in the back seat of the patrol car, behind the protective barrier that separated criminals from officers. Through the window, he could see his neighbors arguing among themselves about what they'd witnessed. Some defended him. Others seemed convinced of his guilt simply because the police had arrested him. The presumption of innocence, he realized, was a luxury not afforded to young black men in America. "Call for additional backup," Martinez instructed. "Webb, we may have a hostile crowd situation developing here." "Is that really necessary?" Webb asked hesitantly. "Everyone seems pretty calm." "Did I ask for your opinion, rookie?" Martinez snapped. "When I give you an order, you follow it. That's how the chain of command works." Webb reluctantly called for more units, knowing that additional officers would only escalate tensions and make the situation worse. But he was trapped between his conscience and his career, between doing what was right and doing what was expected. Inside the patrol car, Jamal tried to process what was happening to him. The planted drugs, the hostile officers, the divided community reaction. This was exactly what his father had warned him about. Exactly what they'd discussed during those serious conversations about surviving encounters with police. But knowing it could happen and experiencing it were two completely different things. He thought about his parents, probably at home wondering why he was late. His mother would be keeping his dinner warm, His father might be reviewing case files in his study. They had no idea their son was sitting in the back of a police car, falsely accused of drug possession, his future hanging in the balance. More sirens wailed in the distance as additional units responded to Webb's call for backup. The suburban street now looked like a crime scene from a major incident, with flashing lights reflecting off the perfectly maintained houses and manicured lawns. Neighbors who'd gone inside earlier came back out to see what new development had occurred. Martinez strutted around like a conquering hero, clearly enjoying the attention and drama he'd created. "This is what happens when we do real police work," he announced to O'Connor. "Proactive enforcement keeps drugs out of our neighborhoods." "Absolutely," O'Connor agreed. "Can't let these dealers think they can operate freely in areas like this. Send a message that this community won't tolerate criminal activity." Their self-congratulatory performance made Webb sick to his stomach. They weren't heroes fighting crime. They were the criminals, abusing their authority to destroy an innocent young man's life. But speaking up would mean ending his career before it truly began, facing ostracism from fellow officers, potentially even retaliation. The additional patrol units arrived with more unnecessary fanfare. Sergeant Patricia Williams, a veteran supervisor, stepped out of her car and surveyed the scene with professional efficiency. She'd seen her share of drug arrests over the years, but something about this one felt different. The neighborhood, the crowd, the level of response for a simple possession charge, it all seemed excessive. "What do we have here?" she asked Martinez. "Caught this kid dealing drugs in the neighborhood," Martinez reported proudly. "Found a baggie of marijuana in his backpack. He was acting suspicious, walking around after dark where he doesn't belong." "He does belong here," Mrs. Chen interjected, still filming. "He lives here. This is his neighborhood." Sergeant Williams looked at the elderly woman with interest. "You know this young man?" "I've known him since he was small. His family lives on Oakwood Drive. He's an excellent student, works at the bookstore, very polite and respectful. These officers planted those drugs. I have it recorded." The accusation of evidence planting was serious enough to get Williams's full attention. She looked at Martinez and O'Connor, both of whom she knew had checkered disciplinary records. Then, she looked at Webb, whose nervous expression suggested there was more to this story. "Anyone else witness the search?" Williams asked the crowd. Several neighbors stepped forward, offering conflicting accounts of what they'd seen. Some supported Mrs. Chen's version. Others claimed they'd arrived too late to see the crucial moments. The confusion and contradictions were typical of crowd situations, but Williams sensed something deeper was wrong. Jamal sat in the patrol car, listening to the debate about his fate through the open windows. His life was being discussed by strangers, as if he weren't even present, as if he were just evidence in a case rather than a human being with dreams and aspirations. The dehumanization was almost as painful as the false arrest itself. Comment below if you think Mrs. Chen was brave to speak up against police misconduct, or if you believe civilians should stay out of police business. Hit that like button if you support citizens who stand up for justice. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of ordinary people fighting extraordinary circumstances. What do you think will happen when this case reaches higher authorities? Will the truth come out, or will the officer's version of events prevail? The answer might shock you more than you can imagine. Let's continue this unbelievable journey and see how one phone call will change everything forever. The processing room at Millfield Heights Police Station buzzed with the routine efficiency of another Tuesday night arrest. Jamal sat on a metal bench, still handcuffed, watching officers complete paperwork with practiced indifference. To them, he was just another case number, another statistic in their monthly reports. They had no idea they were about to encounter a force more powerful than any they'd faced in their careers. Martinez completed the arrest report with obvious satisfaction, embellishing details to justify the stop and search. He described Jamal as evasive and argumentative, despite video evidence to the contrary. O'Connor added his own fictional observations about suspicious behavior and known drug trafficking patterns. Their reports painted a picture of a dangerous criminal caught in the act rather than an honor student walking home from work. "All right, Thompson," Martinez said, consulting the arrest paperwork. "Time for your phone call. Hope whoever you're calling has bail money because you're going to need it. And a good lawyer," O'Connor added with a laugh. Though I doubt you can afford one. You'll probably get stuck with some overworked public defender who'll plea bargain you straight to jail. Webb watched the proceedings with growing unease. The casual cruelty of his training officers, their obvious enjoyment of destroying a young man's life, disgusted him more by the minute. He'd joined the police force to help people, not to participate in this kind of systematic abuse. Jamal was led to a phone mounted on the wall of the processing area. His hands shook slightly as he lifted the receiver, not from fear but from rage. The injustice of his situation burned in his chest like acid, but he forced himself to remain calm. Emotional reactions would only make things worse. He dialed a number he'd memorized since childhood, a number that represented safety and wisdom and protection. As the phone rang, officers nearby continued their paperwork, assuming they were about to overhear a desperate call to parents who would be shocked and disappointed by their son's arrest. "Hello?" The voice that answered was deep and measured, carrying the authority that came from years of courtroom battles and legal victories. "Dad, it's Jamal." His voice was steady, controlled. "I've been arrested and I need you to come to the Millfield Heights police station immediately." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Arrested? For what?" "They're claiming drug possession, but you know that's impossible. They planted evidence during an illegal search. I was walking home from work when they stopped me for no reason." Martinez, who'd been half listening to the conversation, suddenly perked up. Something about the teenager's tone, the way he spoke about illegal searches and planted evidence, suggested he wasn't just another scared kid calling his parents. "Are you injured?" the voice on the phone asked. "No, I'm fine physically. But Dad, they violated every constitutional right I have. Illegal stop, illegal search, planted evidence, false arrest. It's textbook misconduct." O'Connor looked up from his paperwork, a frown creasing his face. The kid was using legal terminology, like he actually understood it. Most teenagers would be crying to their parents about how it wasn't their fault. This one was giving a legal analysis of the arrest. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, the voice said. "Don't say anything else to anyone. Exercise your right to remain silent until I arrive." "And Jamal, yes? I'm proud of you for staying calm and smart. We're going to handle this properly." As Jamal hung up the phone, Martinez approached with newfound interest. "Your daddy a lawyer or something?" "Something like that," Jamal replied quietly. The vague answer sent a chill down Martinez's spine. In his 20 years of police work, he'd learned to recognize certain tones of voice, certain ways of speaking that indicated someone knew more about the legal system than the average citizen. The kid's father hadn't sounded panicked or confused. He'd sounded professional. "What's your father's name?" O'Connor demanded. Jamal looked at him calmly. "I'm exercising my right to remain silent until my attorney arrives." "Attorney?" Webb's voice cracked slightly. "I thought you were calling your parents." "I did call my parent," Jamal said simply. The implications of that statement hit the three officers like a freight train. Martinez frantically pulled out his phone and began typing. O'Connor started searching through arrest databases. Webb just stood there, realizing that their routine arrest of a black teenager was about to become something much bigger and more dangerous. Martinez's phone screen displayed the results of his Google search, and the color drained from his face. Marcus Thompson, District Attorney, Millfield County, former federal prosecutor, former civil rights attorney, winner of the National Bar Association's Civil Rights Award. "Oh shit," O'Connor whispered. "How big a shit?" Webb asked, though he already knew the answer would be catastrophic. "The biggest shit possible," Martinez said, his voice barely audible. "We just arrested the DA's son on fake drug charges." The processing room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant sounds of radio chatter. 3 police officers stared at a 17-year-old boy who'd just revealed himself to be the son of the most powerful prosecutor in the county, a man who'd built his career fighting exactly the kind of police misconduct they'd just committed. Sergeant Williams appeared in the doorway, having overheard the last part of the conversation. "Did someone just say we arrested the DA's son?" Martinez nodded miserably. Williams closed her eyes and took a deep breath. In 30 years of police work, she'd seen officers make mistakes. But this was beyond anything in her experience. "Please tell me you didn't plant evidence on the district attorney's child." The silence that followed was answer enough. "Jesus Christ," Williams muttered. "Do you have any idea what you've done? This isn't just a career-ending mistake. This could bring down the entire department." Webb found his voice. "What happens now?" "Now," Williams said grimly, "we pray that District Attorney Thompson is more interested in justice than revenge, because if he wants blood, he's going to get it." Outside the police station, a black sedan pulled into the parking lot. The man who emerged was tall and distinguished, wearing a perfectly tailored suit despite the late hour. Marcus Thompson had been in courtrooms and crime scenes at all hours, and he knew how to present himself as a force to be reckoned with. As he walked toward the station entrance, Martinez, O'Connor, and Webb watched through the window like condemned prisoners seeing their executioner approach. They'd thought they were arresting just another black teenager from the neighborhood. Instead, they'd captured the son of the one person in the county with both the power and the motivation to destroy them completely. The automatic doors of the police station slid open, and District Attorney Marcus Thompson stepped inside. His presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the building. Conversations stopped. Officers straightened their uniforms. Desk sergeants suddenly became very interested in their paperwork. "I'm here about my son," he said simply. And with those 5 words, 3 police careers began their inevitable slide toward ruin. District Attorney Marcus Thompson's presence in the Millfield Heights police station created a ripple effect that spread through the building like electricity through water. Officers who'd been joking about their latest arrest suddenly found urgent paperwork to complete. Desk sergeants who'd processed hundreds of drug possession cases without a second thought now scrambled to ensure every procedure had been followed to the letter. Marcus walked with the confident stride of a man who'd spent decades in courtrooms, facing hostile judges and aggressive opposing counsel. At 52, he was at the peak of his legal career, having successfully prosecuted corruption cases against politicians, organized crime figures, and yes, police officers who'd forgotten their oath to serve and protect. "Sergeant Williams," he said, approaching the front desk with professional courtesy. "I'm District Attorney Marcus Thompson. I believe you have my son in custody." Williams felt sweat beading on her forehead despite the station's air conditioning. "Yes, sir, Mr. Thompson. He's in processing. I was just reviewing the arrest report. I'd like to see him immediately, and I'll need copies of all documentation related to his arrest. That includes the initial incident report, arrest, warrant if one exists, evidence inventory, and any video footage from body cameras or surveillance systems." The requests were delivered in a calm, professional tone, but Williams understood they weren't really requests. They were demands backed by the full authority of the county prosecutor's office. "Of course, sir. Right away." Williams turned to a junior officer. "Escort Mr. Thompson to processing room 2. Make sure he has privacy with his son." As Marcus was led toward the back of the station, he passed the 3 officers who'd arrested Jamal. Martinez and O'Connor tried to look busy with paperwork, but Webb couldn't take his eyes off the distinguished black man whose son they'd just destroyed. The rookie officer's conscience had been eating at him since the arrest, and seeing the boy's father made everything worse. Processing room 2 was a small, sterile space with concrete walls and fluorescent lighting. Jamal sat at a metal table, still handcuffed, but his posture was straight and his expression calm. When his father entered, relief flickered across his face for just a moment before he composed himself again. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked, examining his son with the careful eye of both a father and a prosecutor. "I'm fine, Dad. Physically, anyway. But they violated every right I have. Illegal stop, warrantless search, planted evidence. And I think one of the officers knows it was wrong, but is too scared to speak up." Marcus sat across from his son, his legal mind already cataloging the constitutional violations described. "Tell me exactly what happened from the beginning. Every detail, every word you can remember." As Jamal recounted the evening's events, Marcus took notes in a leather portfolio he'd pulled from his briefcase. Years of interviewing witnesses and victims had taught him to listen for inconsistencies, gaps in timelines, and details that could be verified or challenged in court. "The officer who planted the drugs," Marcus said. "Describe him." "Hispanic, about 45, thick mustache, name tag said Martinez. His partner was white, thinner, maybe the same age. O'Connor. But the younger officer, Webb, he looked uncomfortable the whole time, like he knew what was happening was wrong." Marcus nodded, already forming a strategy. Divide and conquer. Find the weak link in the conspiracy and exploit it. Webb sounded like a possible ally, someone whose conscience might overcome his loyalty to corrupt colleagues. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Sergeant Williams entered with a thick folder of documents. "The arrest report and related paperwork, Mr. Thompson. I should mention that we're still gathering the body camera footage." "Still gathering?" Marcus's voice carried a hint of steel. "How long does it take to download video files?" "Well, sir, it seems Officer Martinez's camera malfunctioned during the arrest. Technical difficulties, but Officers O'Connor and Webb had their cameras active." Marcus made a note in his portfolio. A conveniently malfunctioning body camera was almost as good as an admission of guilt. "I'll need those working camera files within the hour, Sergeant, and I'll want the technical report on Officer Martinez's equipment failure." "Yes, sir. Absolutely." As Williams left, Marcus turned back to his son. "The planted evidence. You're certain that's what happened?" "Dad, I've never used drugs in my life. You know that. The baggie appeared out of nowhere during the search, and Mrs. Chen was recording. She said she saw Martinez put something in his pocket earlier." Marcus smiled grimly. Eyewitness testimony from a credible community member, potentially supported by video evidence. The case against the officers was building rapidly. Meanwhile, in the main area of the station, Martinez paced nervously, while O'Connor tried to maintain his composure. Both men knew their careers were over, but they weren't ready to accept defeat without a fight. "We stick to our story," O'Connor said quietly. "Kid had drugs, we found them. End of story. His daddy being the DA doesn't change the facts." "Doesn't change the facts?" Martinez laughed bitterly. "The facts are we planted evidence on the prosecutor's son. The facts are we're fucked." Webb listened to their conversation with growing disgust. Even now, facing the destruction of their careers, his training officers were more concerned with covering their asses than acknowledging they'd nearly destroyed an innocent young man's life. "What if I told the truth?" Webb said suddenly. Both older officers turned to stare at him. "What did you say?" O'Connor's voice was dangerously low. "What if I told the truth about what really happened out there? About what I saw Martinez do during the search?" Martinez stepped closer to Webb, his face flushed with anger. "Listen carefully, rookie. You didn't see anything except a righteous drug bust. You understand me? Your career depends on understanding that." "My career is already over," Webb replied, surprising himself with his boldness. "But maybe my conscience doesn't have to be." O'Connor grabbed Webb's arm roughly. "Your conscience? What about loyalty? What about backing up your fellow officers? We took you under our wing, taught you the ropes, and this is how you repay us." "You taught me how to plant evidence and destroy innocent lives," Webb shot back. "That's not police work. That's criminal conspiracy." The confrontation was interrupted by Sergeant Williams's return. She looked at the three officers with obvious disgust. "Officer Webb, District Attorney Thompson, would like to speak with you, privately." Webb felt his stomach drop. This was it. The moment where he'd have to choose between his career and his conscience, between the thin blue line and the truth. "Why does he want to talk to Webb?" Martinez demanded. "Because," Williams said coldly, "unlike you two, Officer Webb's body camera was functioning properly during the arrest. Mr. Thompson is very interested in reviewing that footage." The color drained from O'Connor's face. If Webb's camera had captured Martinez planting the drugs, they were beyond finished. They were looking at criminal charges, civil lawsuits, and federal civil rights violations. Webb followed Williams down the hallway, his legs feeling like jelly. With each step, he moved further away from the corrupt culture that had nearly claimed his soul, and closer to a reckoning that would define the rest of his life. In processing room 2, Marcus Thompson waited with the patience of a predator. He'd reviewed the arrest report and found it laughably inconsistent with his son's account. The officer's stories had more holes than Swiss cheese, and he was about to exploit every single one. "Officer Webb," Marcus said as the young policeman entered. "Please have a seat." Webb sat down nervously, avoiding eye contact with both the district attorney and his son. The weight of what he'd witnessed pressed down on him like a physical force. "I understand you were present during my son's arrest," Marcus continued, "and I understand your body camera was operational throughout the encounter." "Yes, sir," Webb managed to say. "I'm not here to trick you or trap you, Officer Webb. I'm here to get to the truth. My son tells me you looked uncomfortable during the arrest. He believes you knew what was happening was wrong." Webb finally looked up, meeting Marcus's steady gaze. The district attorney's eyes held no anger, no accusation, only a quiet intensity that suggested he already knew most of the truth and was simply giving Webb a chance to confirm it. "What I'm about to ask you might end your career," Marcus said gently. "But what you've already seen has probably ended it anyway. The question is whether you want to go down as someone who participated in a conspiracy or someone who stood up for justice when it mattered most." The room fell silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning system. Webb looked at Jamal, seeing not a criminal or a suspect, but a young man whose life had been derailed by the very officers sworn to protect him. "I saw Officer Martinez plant evidence," Webb said quietly. The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Jamal closed his eyes in relief. Marcus made a note in his portfolio, his expression unchanged. "You're certain about what you saw?" Marcus asked. "Yes, sir. During the search, Martinez palmed something from his own pocket. Later, he pretended to find it in Jamal's jacket. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know how to stop it without destroying my career." "Your career in what?" Marcus asked pointedly. "An organization that rewards planting evidence on innocent teenagers? Officer Webb, if this is the kind of police work your department expects, then losing your career here might be the best thing that ever happens to you." Webb nodded slowly, understanding that he'd crossed a line from which there was no return. But for the first time since the arrest began, he felt like he could look at himself in the mirror. "I'll need you to provide a written statement," Marcus said, "and I'll need the body camera footage preserved immediately. Can you arrange that?" "Yes, sir. I'll make sure it's secured right away." As Webb left to handle the evidence preservation, Marcus turned to his son. "You were right about the rookie. Sometimes conscience wins out over corruption." "What happens now?" Jamal asked. Marcus's expression hardened slightly. "Now, we make sure this never happens to anyone else's child. And we make sure Officers Martinez and O'Connor understand that there are consequences for abusing their authority. Are you going to prosecute them?" "I'm going to recuse myself from direct involvement to avoid any appearance of impropriety. But yes, they'll be prosecuted. What they did to you was criminal conspiracy, civil rights violations, and evidence tampering. That's federal crime territory." Jamal felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Justice would be served, but it had taken his father's position and influence to achieve it. How many other young black men had been victimized by these same officers without having a district attorney for a father? "This is bigger than just tonight, isn't it?" Jamal asked. Marcus nodded grimly. "Much bigger. If Martinez and O'Connor have been planting evidence for years, dozens of innocent people might be sitting in prison right now. We're going to review every case they've been involved in for the past decade." The scope of the potential injustice was staggering. Families destroyed, lives ruined, futures stolen, all to inflate arrest statistics and satisfy the egos of corrupt cops. Outside the processing room, the Millfield Heights police station buzzed with nervous energy. Word of the district attorney's presence had spread through the building, and everyone knew that careers were about to be ended and reputations destroyed. Chief Patricia Williams received an emergency call from the mayor's office. The political implications of the arrest were already spreading through city government like wildfire. A black teenager, the son of the county's top prosecutor, falsely arrested by officers with a history of complaints. It was a public relations nightmare of epic proportions. "How bad is it?" the mayor asked. Worse than bad, Williams replied. We're looking at federal intervention, civil rights lawsuits, and national media attention. And that's if we're lucky. What's the worst-case scenario? Williams looked out her office window at the 3 officers who'd started this disaster. Department under federal oversight, mass review of past arrests, criminal charges against multiple officers, complete loss of community trust. Basically, everything we've worked for over the past 20 years gets destroyed in one night. The clock approached midnight. The arrest that had started as routine police harassment had evolved into a constitutional crisis that would reshape the Millfield Heights Police Department forever. And at the center of it all sat a 17-year-old honor student whose only crime had been walking home while black in suburban America. The night was far from over, but the outcome was already clear. Truth had a powerful ally in District Attorney Marcus Thompson, and justice was about to be served with the full force of the law. By 6 a.m., Mrs. Chen's video had exploded across social media platforms like digital wildfire. The grainy footage of a black teenager being arrested while neighbors argued about planted evidence had been shared thousands of times, each repost, adding fuel to a growing firestorm of public outrage. The hashtag #JachaJamalThompson began trending nationally as the story spread from local Facebook groups to major news networks. Marcus Thompson stood in his home office, still wearing the suit from the night before, watching CNN's morning coverage of his son's arrest. The irony wasn't lost on him that his family's nightmare had become national news, specifically because of who he was. How many other families had endured similar injustices without cameras, without influence, without anyone caring enough to make it a story? This is a developing story from Millfield Heights, where the teenage son of District Attorney Marcus Thompson was arrested on drug charges that the family claims were fabricated, the anchor reported. Cell phone video appears to show officers planting evidence during the arrest, raising serious questions about police conduct in this affluent suburban community. The morning news programs couldn't get enough of the story. A black prosecutor's son, an affluent white neighborhood, planted evidence, community witnesses. It had every element that drove ratings and sparked national conversations about race and justice in America. Jamal sat at the kitchen table, picking at the breakfast his mother had prepared while scrolling through social media reactions to his arrest. The comments ranged from supportive to horrific, revealing the deep racial divisions that still plagued American society. They got caught this time because they messed with the wrong family, one commenter wrote. How many others have they done this to? Typical race baiting, another responded. Kid probably was dealing drugs and his daddy is trying to get him off. Did you see that video? Clear evidence planting. Those cops should be in prison. The polarized responses reflected a country still struggling to confront the reality of systemic racism in law enforcement. Even with video evidence, even with witness testimony, some people refuse to accept that police officers might lie, plant evidence, or target citizens based on race. Dr. Angela Thompson, Jamal's mother and a respected pediatrician, watched her son process the online hatred with growing concern. Maybe you should stay off social media for a while, she suggested gently. I need to see what people are saying, Jamal replied. This isn't just about me anymore. It's become something bigger. And he was right. By noon, news vans had gathered outside the Millfield Heights police station. Reporters from local stations, national networks, and online publications crowded the sidewalk, all wanting statements about the arrest that had shocked the community. Chief Patricia Williams found herself facing the media firestorm she'd dreaded. Standing behind a podium in the station's briefing room, she faced a room full of hostile journalists demanding answers about her department's conduct. Chief Williams, do you have any comment on allegations that your officers planted evidence on a 17-year-old honor student? Shouted a reporter from the front row. The incident is under investigation, Williams replied carefully. We take all allegations of misconduct seriously and will follow proper procedures to determine what occurred. Proper procedures? Another journalist interrupted. There's video evidence of evidence planting. What procedures are needed to see what's right in front of everyone's eyes? Williams felt sweat beading under her uniform collar. I cannot comment on ongoing investigations or discuss evidence that may be part of legal proceedings. The evasive answers only fueled more aggressive questioning. Reporters who'd covered police misconduct stories for years recognized the standard playbook of denial, delay, and deflection. "Chief, how many complaints have been filed against officers Martinez and O'Connor over their careers?" asked Sarah Chen, an investigative reporter for the regional newspaper. "Personnel matters are confidential," Williams responded. "Not when those personnel are accused of federal civil rights violations," Chen shot back. "The public has a right to know if these officers have a history of misconduct." Behind the scenes, Martinez and O'Connor huddled with their police union, representatives, and expensive criminal defense attorneys. The union president, Detective Frank Morrison, tried to frame the incident as an attack on all police officers. "This is what happens when anti-police activists get hold of a story," Morrison told the local news. "Two decorated officers with decades of service are being crucified based on cell phone video that doesn't show the whole picture." But Morrison's spin was undermined by Webb's cooperation with investigators. The rookie officer had provided a detailed written statement describing Martinez's evidence planting, complete with timestamps that could be verified against body camera footage. The body camera video, when finally released, was devastating to the officer's defense. Webb's camera had captured everything: Martinez palming the baggie, his theatrical discovery of the evidence, O'Connor's knowing participation in the charade. The footage was so clear, so damning, that even the police union's lawyers advised their clients to consider plea bargains. Local civil rights organizations seized on the case as an example of everything wrong with American policing. Reverend Michael Jackson, president of the local NAACP chapter, held a press conference outside the police station. "This arrest represents the daily reality for young black men in America," Reverend Jackson declared. "The only difference is that this time, the victim had a father with the power to fight back. How many Jamal Thompsons have been railroaded by these same officers? How many innocent people are sitting in prison right now because of planted evidence and police lies?" The questions resonated with community members who'd long suspected that Martinez and O'Connor were problem officers. Complaints that had been buried or dismissed suddenly seemed credible in light of the video evidence. Maria Santos, whose teenage son had been arrested by Martinez 2 years earlier on drug charges, came forward with her story. "I knew my boy didn't have drugs," she told reporters. "He was a good student, never in trouble. But who was going to believe a Hispanic mother against a police officer? Now I know what really happened." The floodgates opened as more families shared similar experiences. The pattern became clear. Martinez and O'Connor had been targeting minority teenagers for years, planting evidence to inflate their arrest statistics and advance their careers. Meanwhile, Jamal tried to maintain some normalcy in his life despite the media circus swirling around him. He still had a summer reading assignment to complete, college applications to finalize, and a future to plan. But the arrest had changed him in fundamental ways. "I always knew racism existed," he told his father during a quiet moment between interviews. "But knowing it and experiencing it are completely different things. It makes you realize how fragile everything really is." Marcus nodded, understanding exactly what his son meant. Success, education, good behavior, none of it mattered when someone in authority decided you didn't belong. The American dream could be destroyed by a corrupt cop with a baggie of fake drugs and a willingness to lie under oath. Comment number 1 if you believe the media attention was necessary to expose this injustice, or comment number 2 if you think the coverage went too far. Hit that like button if you support transparency in police investigations, and make sure you subscribe for more stories that shine light on important social issues. With national attention now focused on this case, what do you think will happen when other victims start coming forward? Will this be the catalyst for real change, or just another story that fades from headlines? The answer will determine not just the fate of 2 corrupt officers, but the future of justice in an entire community. The federal courthouse in downtown Millfield buzzed with activity as Special Prosecutor Sarah Chen prepared the most significant civil rights case her office had handled in decades. Chen, a former federal prosecutor with a reputation for taking on corruption cases, had been appointed specifically to avoid any appearance of conflict given Marcus Thompson's position as county district attorney. The grand jury room on the third floor had become the epicenter of a legal earthquake that would reshape law enforcement in the entire region. Over 3 days of testimony, Chen presented a case so comprehensive and damning that even veteran prosecutors were shocked by its scope. Officer Tyler Webb sat in the witness chair, his voice steady as he detailed the events of that July evening. His testimony, backed by body camera footage and corroborated by civilian witnesses, painted a picture of systematic abuse that went far beyond a single incident. Officer Martinez instructed me to call for backup even though there was no threat, Webb testified. When I asked if it was necessary, he told me that questioning orders was not my job. Later, during the search, I clearly observed him palm an object from his own pocket and subsequently discover it in Mr. Thompson's jacket. The grand jurors, a diverse group of citizens from across the county, listened with visible disgust as the evidence mounted. Video footage showed Martinez and O'Connor high-fiving each other after Jamal's arrest, celebrating what they believed was another successful frame job. Chen had done her homework thoroughly. Financial records revealed that both officers had received commendations and salary increases based partly on their arrest statistics. Personnel files, finally released under federal subpoena, showed dozens of complaints from minority citizens about planted evidence, excessive force, and racial profiling. The pattern is clear, Chen told the grand jury. These officers specifically targeted young Black and Hispanic men in affluent neighborhoods, knowing that juries would be more likely to believe police testimony over minority defendants. They turned constitutional violations into a career advancement strategy. The evidence extended far beyond Jamal's case. Maria Santos testified about her son's arrest, breaking down as she described how Martinez had found drugs in her boy's backpack during a school visit. DNA analysis of the evidence from that case revealed no traces of her son's fingerprints on the baggie, a scientific impossibility if he had actually possessed the drugs. James Washington, a college student home for summer break, recounted his arrest by O'Connor the previous year. The officer had claimed to smell marijuana during a traffic stop, then discovered a small amount during a vehicle search. Washington had pled guilty to avoid jail time, but the similarities to other cases now suggested he'd been another victim of evidence planting. By the end of the week, the grand jury had heard testimony from 12 different victims, all young, men of color, all arrested by Martinez and O'Connor under suspiciously similar circumstances. The pattern was so clear that even the officers' defense attorneys began advising them to consider cooperation deals. But Martinez and O'Connor weren't ready to surrender. Backed by their police union and funded by a legal defense fund, they hired the most expensive criminal defense team money could buy. Their strategy focused on character assassination and racial division. These officers are being railroaded by political correctness, their lead attorney Jonathan Pierce told reporters. District Attorney Thompson is using his influence to destroy good cops who were just doing their jobs. This is what happens when the justice system becomes infected by racial politics. The defense strategy backfired spectacularly. Pierce's comments triggered a backlash from civil rights organizations, legal scholars, and even some police officers who were disgusted by the attempt to justify evidence planting with racial rhetoric. Chief Patricia Williams, facing pressure from the mayor, city council, and federal authorities, announced sweeping reforms to the police department. Mandatory body cameras for all officers, civilian oversight committees, implicit bias training, and most importantly, federal monitoring of the department's practices. We cannot and will not tolerate officers who betray the public trust, Williams declared at a packed press conference. The actions of these individuals do not represent the values of this department or the community we serve. But the reforms came too late to save her own career. Within a month, Williams announced her retirement, acknowledging that new leadership was needed to restore community trust. The legal consequences extended beyond criminal charges. The Thompson family filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the police department, seeking monetary damages and structural reforms. But more importantly, every conviction obtained with testimony from Martinez and O'Connor was now subject to review. The County Public Defender's Office established a special unit to handle appeals from the officers' previous cases. Within weeks, they had identified 47 convictions that might have been based on planted evidence or perjured testimony. Marcus Thompson, despite his personal investment in the case, recused himself from any direct involvement in the prosecutions. But he worked behind the scenes to ensure that proper resources were allocated to reviewing potentially tainted convictions. Justice isn't just about punishing the guilty, he explained to reporters. It's about protecting the innocent, even when that protection comes years too late. The first exoneration came just 6 weeks after Jamal's arrest. David Rodriguez, sentenced to 2 years in prison for drug possession, based solely on Martinez's testimony, was released when new evidence proved the drugs had been planted. Rodriguez walked out of prison to cameras and reporters, but also to a family that had never stopped believing in his innocence. "I lost 2 years of my life because of those officers," Rodriguez said, his voice shaking with emotion. "2 years I'll never get back, but at least now people know the truth." The human cost of the officers' corruption was staggering. Families destroyed by false convictions, young men with criminal records that prevented them from getting jobs or attending college, communities that had lost faith in the justice system designed to protect them. Federal authorities expanded their investigation to include other officers who might have known about the evidence planting, but failed to report it. The code of silence that protected corrupt cops was finally being broken, and the consequences rippled through the entire department. Judge Patricia Morrison, who had presided over many of Martinez and O'Connor's cases, faced her own ethical review. Legal scholars questioned whether she should have recognized the pattern of suspiciously similar arrests and evidence discoveries. The judicial system's failure to catch obvious corruption raised uncomfortable questions about complicity and willful blindness. As autumn approached, the grand jury returned indictments against Martinez and O'Connor on federal civil rights charges, evidence tampering, conspiracy, and perjury. Each charge carried potential sentences of 10 to 20 years in federal prison. The indictment sent shockwaves through police departments across the country. The message was clear. The era of immunity for police misconduct was ending, and officers who abused their authority would face real consequences. But for Jamal Thompson, the legal victories felt bittersweet. Justice was being served, but it had taken his father's position and national media attention to achieve it. How many other young black men were sitting in prison right now, victims of officers who hadn't been caught on camera? The question haunted him as he prepared for his senior year of high school, knowing that his arrest had become a symbol of both the problems and possibilities of American justice. The federal courthouse had never seen anything like it. Lines of people wrapped around the block, hoping to get seats in the gallery for what legal experts were calling the most important police misconduct trial in decades. United States versus Martinez. And O'Connor had captured national attention, not just for the brazen nature of the crimes, but for what it represented about systemic racism in American law enforcement. Judge Elena Rodriguez, a respected federal jurist with 20 years on the bench, presided over jury selection with meticulous care. The case would rise or fall on the credibility of witnesses, the interpretation of video evidence, and the willingness of 12 citizens to hold police officers accountable for betraying their oath. This case is about the fundamental principle that no one is above the law, Special Prosecutor Sarah Chen told the jury during opening statements. Not even those who wear badges and take sacred oaths to protect and serve. The evidence will show that officers Martinez and O'Connor systematically violated the constitutional rights of young men based on their race, planting evidence and committing perjury to advance their careers. The defense, led by Jonathan Pierce, tried to portray the officers as dedicated public servants caught in a political firestorm. These men have served this community for over 40 years combined, Pierce argued. They've risked their lives to keep your neighborhood safe. Now they're being destroyed by a rush to judgment, fueled by anti-police sentiment and racial politics. But Pierce's strategy crumbled almost immediately when Chen played Webb's body camera footage for the jury. The video was devastating in its clarity, showing Martinez's sleight of hand as he planted the baggie, O'Connor's knowing participation, and their celebratory demeanor after destroying a teenager's evening. Webb's testimony was the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. The young officer, now working as a security guard after resigning from the police force, spoke with quiet conviction about what he'd witnessed. "I became a police officer to help people," Webb told the jury. "What I saw that night wasn't police work. It was criminal conspiracy. Officer Martinez planted evidence on an innocent young man, and Officer O'Connor helped cover it up. I couldn't be part of that anymore." The defense tried to attack Webb's credibility, suggesting he was seeking attention or revenge against former colleagues, but his testimony was corroborated by multiple sources: Mrs. Chen's video, other civilian witnesses, and most damning of all, the officer's own body cameras. Chen methodically presented evidence of the officer's pattern of misconduct. Maria Santos took the stand, describing her son's arrest with tears streaming down her face. "I knew my boy was innocent," she testified. "But who would believe a poor Hispanic mother against a police officer? I felt so helpless, so angry. These men destroyed my family's trust in justice." James Washington testified about his traffic stop arrest, his voice shaking with emotion as he described pleading guilty to a crime he didn't commit. "I was scared," he admitted. "My public defender said fighting it would mean risking real jail time, so I pled guilty and accepted a criminal record for something I never did." The parade of victims painted a horrifying picture of systematic abuse. Young men who'd lost college scholarships, job opportunities, and faith in the American dream because of planted evidence and police lies. The human cost of corruption made visible in a federal courtroom. Dr. Angela Thompson testified about the impact on her own family, describing the trauma her son had endured and the way the arrest had shattered their sense of security. "We thought our education, our success, our reputation in the community would protect us," she said. "We learned that none of that matters when officers decide you don't belong." Jamal himself took the stand on the trial's fifth day. Now 18 and preparing for his freshman year at Harvard, he spoke with remarkable composure about the night that had changed his life. "I was walking home from my job at the bookstore," he testified. "I had my student ID, my work receipt, books for summer reading. I was doing everything right, everything I'd been taught to do. But none of that mattered because Officers Martinez and O'Connor had already decided I was guilty of something." The defense tried to rattle him during cross-examination, suggesting he was seeking publicity or financial gain from the case, but Jamal's calm, thoughtful responses only reinforced his credibility. "I'm not here for money or fame," he said. "I'm here because what happened to me happens to young black men every day across this country. The only difference is that I had a father with the power to fight back. I'm testifying for all the others who didn't have that power." Expert witnesses explained the psychological and social impact of police misconduct on communities. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, a criminologist from the State University, testified about how evidence planting and false arrests destroy the social contract between police and citizens. "When officers plant evidence, they don't just harm individual victims," Dr. Martinez explained. "They undermine the entire foundation of law enforcement legitimacy. Communities stop cooperating with police, stop reporting crimes, stop believing in justice. The damage extends far beyond any single case." The defense's case was weak and grew weaker with each witness. Character witnesses for Martinez and O'Connor were undermined by the overwhelming evidence of their crimes. Expert testimony about the challenges of police work fell flat against video footage of evidence planting. Pierce's closing argument was a desperate appeal to jury prejudices, suggesting that convicting the officers would embolden criminals and endanger public safety. "If you destroy these officers' careers over one mistake, one moment of poor judgment, you'll be sending a message that police can't do their jobs effectively." Chen's rebuttal was surgical in its precision. Planting evidence isn't a mistake or poor judgment. It's a calculated criminal act. These officers didn't make errors. They made choices. They chose to violate their oaths, betray public trust, and destroy innocent lives to advance their careers. The question isn't whether they're guilty. The video evidence makes that clear. The question is whether we're a nation of laws that apply to everyone, or a nation where badges provide immunity from justice. The jury deliberated for just 4 hours. When they returned to the courtroom, The verdict was written on their faces before the foreman spoke. On the charge of conspiracy to violate civil rights, we find the defendant Bradley Martinez guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to violate civil rights, we find the defendant Sean O'Connor guilty. The guilty verdicts continued across all charges: evidence tampering, perjury, deprivation of rights under color of law. Martinez slumped in his chair, finally understanding that his career and freedom were over. O'Connor stared straight ahead, refusing to show emotion even as his world collapsed. Judge Rodriguez scheduled sentencing for 6 weeks later, but her comments during the verdict suggested the officers would face significant prison time. The jury has spoken clearly about behavior that strikes at the heart of our constitutional system, she said. This court will ensure that the sentences reflect the gravity of these crimes. Outside the courthouse, Jamal stood with his parents and a crowd of supporters. The verdict was a victory, but it felt incomplete without acknowledging all the victims who hadn't received justice. This isn't the end, Jamal told reporters. It's the beginning of a conversation about how we reform law enforcement to serve all communities fairly. My case got attention because of who my father is, but there are thousands of other cases just like mine that never make the news. Reverend Michael Jackson, who had organized community support throughout the trial, spoke about the broader implications. Today, justice won. But we cannot forget that it took a district attorney's son being victimized for the system to respond. Real reform means protecting everyone's children, not just those with powerful parents. The conviction sent shockwaves through police departments nationwide. Training programs were revamped, body camera policies strengthened, and oversight mechanisms expanded. The case became a textbook example of why accountability matters in law enforcement. But perhaps the most important outcome was the restoration of hope in communities that had lost faith in justice. Young people who had been afraid to report police misconduct found their voices. Families who had been told to accept injustice began demanding answers. The trial was over, but the transformation it sparked was just beginning. 5 years after that July evening that changed everything, Jamal Thompson stood at the podium in Harvard Law School's prestigious Langdell Hall, delivering the keynote address for the graduating class of 2029. At 23, he had become one of the youngest graduates in the school's history, earning his Juris Doctor with highest honors while maintaining his commitment to civil rights advocacy. 5 years ago, I was a 17-year-old walking home from work when my life was forever altered by 2 corrupt police officers, Jamal began, his voice carrying the confidence that comes from surviving injustice and emerging stronger. That night taught me that the law can be both a weapon of oppression and a tool of liberation. The difference lies in who wields it and how they choose to use their power. The audience of graduating students, professors, and distinguished guests hung on every word. Jamal's story had become legendary in legal circles, studied in constitutional law classes, and cited in Supreme Court briefs about police accountability. Today, as we prepare to enter the legal profession, I challenge each of you to remember that our law degrees are not just credentials. They are responsibilities. Responsibilities to defend the defenseless, to speak truth to power, and to ensure that justice is not a privilege reserved for those with influence, but a right guaranteed to all. In the audience, Marcus and Angela Thompson watched their son with overwhelming pride. The nightmare that had nearly destroyed their family had ultimately strengthened their resolve to fight for justice. Marcus had been elected state attorney general the previous year, running on a platform of criminal justice reform and police accountability. The transformation extended far beyond the Thompson family. The Millfield Heights Police Department had become a national model for progressive policing under Chief Maria Santos, the first Latina to lead the department. Santos, who had been promoted from within after the previous leadership was replaced, implemented community policing strategies that rebuilt trust between officers and residents. We learned that true public safety comes from community partnership, not community domination, Chief Santos explained to a delegation of police chiefs visiting from other cities. Our officers are trained to see every citizen as someone's child, deserving of respect and protection regardless of their race or background. The department's transformation was remarkable. Use of force incidents dropped by 70%. Community complaints fell to nearly zero. Crime rates actually decreased as residents began cooperating with police investigations, reporting suspicious activity, and trusting officers to respond appropriately. Officer Tyler Webb had found his calling as the department's community liaison coordinator. His courage in testifying against Martinez and O'Connor had initially made him a pariah among some officers, but his dedication to ethical policing eventually earned respect throughout the force. "I lost friends when I told the truth," Webb reflected, during a training session for new recruits. "But I gained something more valuable, the ability to look at myself in the mirror every morning, knowing I did the right thing. That's worth more than any amount of peer approval." Webb's story became part of the Academy's ethics curriculum, taught as an example of moral courage under pressure. New officers learned that the thin blue line meant protecting good cops from bad ones, not the other way around. The legal consequences of Martinez and O'Connor's crimes continued to reverberate through the justice system. Both officers received 15-year federal sentences, among the longest ever imposed for police misconduct. They would be eligible for parole in 12 years, but their law enforcement careers were permanently over. More importantly, their convictions led to the overturning of 63 wrongful convictions based on planted evidence or perjured testimony. The county established a victim compensation fund that paid millions of dollars to those who had been wrongfully imprisoned, though money could never truly compensate for stolen years and shattered lives. David Rodriguez, the first person exonerated in the aftermath of Jamal's case, had rebuilt his life remarkably. After his release from prison, he earned his GED, attended community college, and was now working as a paralegal specializing in wrongful conviction cases. "Prison taught me that the system is broken," Rodriguez said during a panel discussion about criminal justice reform. "But seeing officers actually go to jail for their crimes taught me that the system can be fixed when good. People demand accountability." The case had broader implications for policing nationwide. Congress passed the Marcus Thompson Police Accountability Act, requiring federal oversight of departments with patterns of civil rights violations. Body cameras became mandatory for all federally funded law enforcement agencies. Most significantly, qualified immunity protections for police officers were significantly narrowed, making it easier to hold corrupt cops accountable in civil court. Mrs. Chen, the elderly neighbor whose courage in recording the arrest had helped expose the truth, became an unlikely civil rights icon. At 82, she traveled the country speaking about the importance of citizen oversight and community engagement in police accountability. "I was just an old lady with a cell phone," she would tell audiences with characteristic humility. "But sometimes that's all it takes to change the world. When we see injustice, we have a choice: look away or speak up. I chose to speak up, and I encourage everyone to do the same." The Millfield Heights community itself had undergone a profound transformation. What had once been a neighborhood divided by silent prejudices became a model of racial reconciliation and social justice. The incident forced difficult conversations about privilege, racism, and complicity that many residents had avoided for years. Town hall meetings that had once focused on property taxes and zoning ordinances now addressed implicit bias, community policing, and restorative justice. Neighbors who had previously lived in polite isolation began forming genuine relationships across racial lines. The Millfield Heights Community Justice Center, established in a renovated building donated by a local philanthropist, became a hub for police community dialogue, youth mentorship programs, and conflict resolution services. The center's director, Dr. James Washington, the same young man who had been falsely arrested by O'Connor years earlier, dedicated his life to preventing others from experiencing what he had endured. "My arrest destroyed my faith in justice," Dr. Washington explained to visitors touring the center. "But watching those officers go to prison restored it. Now I work every day to build a justice system that protects everyone equally, regardless of race or social status." The ripple effects of Jamal's case extended into academia as well. Law schools across the country revised their curricula to include more extensive training on police misconduct, civil rights law, and prosecutorial ethics. The Thompson Protocol became standard practice for handling cases involving potential police corruption. Professor Sarah Chen, the former special prosecutor who had secured Martinez and O'Connor's convictions, now taught at Harvard Law School alongside other distinguished faculty. Her course on prosecutorial ethics and police accountability drew students from around the world who wanted to learn how to hold law enforcement accountable. The Thompson case taught us that justice delayed is not always justice denied. Professor Chen told her students, sometimes it takes years, even decades, for the truth to emerge, but when it does, we have an obligation to act decisively and comprehensively to address systemic problems. The case had also sparked innovation in police technology and training. Departments nationwide adopted new protocols for evidence handling, body camera management, and civilian oversight. The Martinez Rule required independent verification of all drug evidence, making it virtually impossible to plant evidence without detection. Training academies restructured their programs to emphasize constitutional rights, de-escalation techniques, and cultural competency. The old warrior mentality that had dominated police culture for decades was gradually being replaced by a guardian philosophy that emphasized protection and service over control and compliance. For Jamal personally, the experience had crystallized his life's purpose in ways he never could have imagined. His senior thesis at Harvard, titled Constitutional Policing in Diverse Communities, Lessons from Millfield Heights, became required reading in police science programs nationwide. I used to think justice was about punishing wrongdoers, Jamal reflected in his thesis conclusion. Now I understand that true justice is about creating systems that prevent wrongdoing in the first place. My arrest was a terrible experience, but it opened my eyes to the possibility of transformative change. His romantic relationship with Maya Rodriguez, David Rodriguez's younger sister, had blossomed during their shared involvement in criminal justice reform advocacy. Both were heading to different cities for their legal careers, but their commitment to fighting injustice had created an unbreakable bond. We're the generation that will fix this, Maya told Jamal during a quiet moment after his graduation ceremony. Your case was the spark, but we're going to be the ones who build the fire that burns away all the corruption and prejudice. The Keogh Thompson family's civil rights lawsuit against the Millfield Heights Police Department had been settled for $12 million, making it one of the largest police misconduct settlements in state history. But more importantly, the consent decree that accompanied the settlement required federal oversight of the department for 10 years, ensuring that reforms would be maintained and strengthened. Marcus Thompson's election as state attorney general had given him a platform to implement criminal justice reforms statewide. His first major initiative was the creation of special prosecutors' offices dedicated exclusively to police misconduct cases, removing the inherent conflicts of interest that had allowed corruption to flourish for decades. Local prosecutors work with police every day, Attorney General Thompson explained during a press conference announcing the new program. Asking them to prosecute the same officers they depend on for investigations creates impossible conflicts. Independent prosecutors can pursue justice without worrying about damaging working relationships. The program was already showing results. Police misconduct prosecutions had increased by 400% in the first year, sending a clear message that badge-wearing criminals would face the same consequences as any other lawbreakers. Angela Thompson had channeled her own anger and pain into advocacy work, establishing the Thompson Foundation for Police Accountability. The foundation provided legal support for families victimized by police misconduct, funded research into bias in law enforcement, and lobbied for legislative reforms at state and federal levels. Every family deserves the same resources we had, Dr. Thompson explained to foundation donors. Money for lawyers, time to fight, influence to be heard. We're working to level the playing field so that justice doesn't depend on who your father is or how much money you have. The foundation's emergency response team had already assisted dozens of families facing situations similar to what the Thompsons had experienced. Pro bono lawyers, media specialists, and civil rights advocates could be mobilized within hours to ensure that police misconduct cases received proper attention and investigation. As Jamal prepared to begin his legal career at a prestigious civil rights firm in Washington, D.C., he carried with him the lessons learned from that terrible night 5 years earlier. The experience had taught him that individual courage could spark systemic change, but only sustained effort could make that change permanent. His first case as a junior associate involved representing a black teenager in Mississippi, whose arrest bore striking similarities to his own experience. The body camera footage showed clear evidence planting, but local authorities were reluctant to prosecute. Jamal's involvement brought national attention to the case and ultimately led to federal intervention. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, Jamal told reporters covering the Mississippi case. We've made progress since my arrest, but the work is far from finished. Every generation has to fight for justice in their own time and place. The night that had started with a simple walk home from work had become a catalyst for one of the most significant police reform movements in American history. Jamal Thompson's arrest had exposed the cancer of systemic racism in law enforcement and provided a roadmap for surgical removal of that cancer. But perhaps the most important lesson was that justice, once achieved, required constant vigilance to maintain. The officers who had tried to destroy Jamal's future had instead unleashed forces that would protect countless other young people from experiencing similar injustices. As Jamal looked toward his future, he knew that his father's phone number would always be just a call away, but more importantly, he knew that other families facing similar crises would have advocates, resources, and hope that hadn't existed before that July evening when everything changed. The transformation was complete, but the work would never end. Justice, Jamal had learned, was not a destination but a journey, one that required each generation to fight for the rights and dignity of the next. If this story moved you, please share your thoughts in the comments below about how communities can better support police accountability and reform. What steps do you think are most important for preventing incidents like Jamal's arrest? Hit that like button if you believe in the power of ordinary citizens to create extraordinary change, and subscribe for more incredible true stories of courage overcoming corruption. Share this video with friends and family who need to understand how one phone call, one moment of truth, can transform an entire system of justice. Thank you for joining us on this remarkable journey from injustice to accountability, from corruption to reform, from despair to hope. May we all have the courage to speak truth to power when justice demands it, and may we never forget that real change begins with individuals willing to stand up and say, "This is wrong." Until next time, keep fighting for justice, keep believing in change, and keep remembering that every voice matters in the struggle for a more perfect union. This powerful story reveals profound truths about justice, courage, and transformation in modern America. First, privilege and position matter deeply in our legal system. Jamal received justice primarily because his father wielded prosecutorial power, highlighting how many other families lack such resources when facing police misconduct. Second, individual courage can spark systemic change. Officer Webb's decision to tell the truth, Mrs. Chen's brave recording, and the Thompson family's refusal to accept injustice created ripple effects that transformed an entire community. Third, accountability requires sustained effort, not just momentary outrage. Real reform happened through legislative changes, federal oversight, and institutional restructuring that addressed root causes rather than surface symptoms. Fourth, technology serves as a powerful equalizer when properly implemented. Body cameras and civilian recordings provided undeniable evidence that overcame traditional police narratives. Fifth, community solidarity across racial lines proves essential for meaningful progress. The diverse coalition that supported Jamal demonstrated that justice transcends individual identity when people unite around shared values. Finally, the story illustrates how personal trauma can become purposeful advocacy. Jamal's horrific experience became fuel for lifelong dedication to civil rights, proving that even terrible injustices can generate positive transformation when channeled toward constructive change. What do you think was the most crucial moment in Jamal's journey toward justice? Comment below with your thoughts on how ordinary citizens can hold police accountable in their own communities. If this story inspired you to believe in the power of truth over corruption, smash that like button right now. Subscribe and ring the notification bell for more incredible true stories that expose injustice and celebrate courage. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand how systemic change really happens. Thank you for being part of our community that believes justice should be colorblind and accessible to all. Your engagement helps these important stories reach people who need hope and inspiration. Together, we can build a world where every teenager can walk home safely, regardless of their race or neighborhood. Stay strong, stay informed, and never stop fighting for what's right.